Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Something Green virtual wedding fair brought to you by North London Waste Authority. All weekend, we've been talking about more sustainable ways to plan your wedding. So, if you have a big day coming up, or you've had one that was planned from last year that was pushed back, and you're thinking of some new ideas, then this is the place for you. We've got a whole host of planet friendly wedding experts here for you until 3 p.m. today. And right now, I'm with Jacinta from Forage and Feast. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Today we're going to be talking all about how to have a more sustainable wedding breakfast. And I wondered, Jacinta, can you tell us exactly what Forage and Feast is and what you do?
So, Forage and Feast is a grazing company. So, we largely did large events prior to 2020. However, very exciting news that weddings are back on the horizon. And in the meantime, doing lots of small delivery platters and boxes. So, delicious things to have at home and enjoy at home.
And your idea is that rather than having a kind of big sit down dinner or like a traditional buffet with your sandwiches and your sausage rolls, this is a bit more of a spread. So you kind of arrange everything and lay all of your vegetables out and cheeses out on a kind of a big platter.
Yes, definitely. So grazing by the meter, that way people can come up and take the bits that they want. It's certainly more social, which I'm sure we're all going to be keen to have very shortly. Just craving, that social kind of experience. And it's beautiful. Like it's really stunning. It's sort of like food arrangements instead of flower arrangements. It's bright. Causes conversation. People always eat with the camera first.
And when we're talking about sustainability, what is it about this particular way of kind of preparing a wedding breakfast that makes it more sustainable?
So there's a few different elements that make it more sustainable, especially if you're doing it by the meter. You're buying kind of large cheeses by kilogram as opposed to small cheeses packaged. If you're doing it that way, but also the vegetables aren't chopped up small, so we're not chopping off lots of bits that end up in the bin, and it's kind of like eating the whole bits and pieces. And also, people kind of select what they want to. Traditionally a lot of weddings are alternate drop. People might not want what they get, and then it's kind of like whole steaks or whole bits of chicken that people feel are too dry that are left behind, and a lot of it ends up in the bin. Whereas people can select exactly what they want, and then they tend to eat it all, and they can keep coming back. They don't have to like fill up their plate and kind of sit with it. They can, nibble and graze.
So it's something a bit more informal than,
Yes.
everyone having to sit down and wait for their dinner to come around.
Absolutely. It can also be set, if you do want a seated dinner, it can also be set up running through the tables as well. So it's always like really impactful. Like, I did a wedding that was like a Midsummer Night Dream theme, and it was all like running down the tables with flowers, and it was just gorgeous. Like, people, it's like a real wow factor for the wedding as well as being more sustainable because you're not using things that have all that packaging.
Yeah, that's incredible. And do you think food waste is a big issue in weddings generally? Do people order too much or, potentially try and do a catch all order that actually turns out nobody likes?
Yeah, definitely. Because ultimately it is really expensive. And this is kind of ends up cheaper per head, which is a big selling point. And they kind of do a so the catch-all order, definitely. And, it ends up being like chicken or it ends up being, something quite plain that people
Mhm.
don't think is like particularly fancy because budget's super important, or they kind of, like I said, the alternate drop, and you don't really have much of a choice. So I think, and people over cater for
Yeah.
sure.
And is that
So
just because
pardon?
I was going to say, is that just because they're worried about, there not being enough on the day, there not being places for anyone else to go and get food, so you just pile more on.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's so hard to know like how much people are going to eat. The last thing that you want is anyone walking away from your big day saying, "Oh, there wasn't much food." So people kind of panic and go overboard and have so many different things going on. And I think like this is a really nice way of capturing everything. This can be starter, main, and dessert, and it's already all there, and they can take what they want. And the best part about this is actually you can pack up some of the bits and have them the next morning. That's definitely like what my family has done when we've done it for big occasions. So it's not like your hot meal that does just end up in the bin. So you can ask the staff to pack it away, or if you're doing it at home or keeping it small, it's certainly something that you can just pop away for yourself the next day and keep going.
And you're mentioning that you're selling it by the meter. So how do you help people decide how much that they need per person? Because I imagine that's the tricky thing to try and work out.
The most important thing is know your audience. So, my family, a meter doesn't go that far. It's really that simple. So, I would say a meter for my family probably does 10 to 12 of us because everyone's going to tuck in and like it's really nice because you're grazing all day. So, I would say with my family, I would do 10 to 12 a meter. But if your family, like you know that they don't like eat a lot at big functions or things like that, and just be honest with each other about what your family eats. Um, yeah, and so then you say 25 to a meter, and that's how I just say be really honest about how much your family's going to eat.
Mine are definitely eaters. I think that we would definitely need a meter for 10. That would probably work for us.
My friends too, but like, especially, I think corporate it's tricky, but I think weddings everyone's there to have a good time, so you definitely are on like 15 to a meter at least.
And I think for weddings as well, you can expect that, if you've got people there all day, they probably haven't eaten anything before, and different to a corporate function where somebody might have, snuck out and got something before they've arrived. You've got people there for a
Exactly.
long period of time.
And I think like once the drinks start flowing, having that thing there that you can keep going back to really helps.
A little grazing station for you to
Once
return
people get
to.
snacky.
And in terms of your sourcing and the way that you look at sustainability that way, I think it's probably something that people might not know the kind of questions to ask their vendors about where their food is coming from and how it's sourced. And
Yes.
I wonder how you handle that as a business.
So as a business, I mean, I've worked in hospitality for a long time, so it's kind of something that's always been on the forefront of my mind regarding sustainability. It's difficult to be perfectly sustainable when it comes to food, particularly in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of great produce that comes from here, particularly cheeses, and there are some really great charcuterie companies. The fact of the matter is you need to kind of look at the trade-off. Like it is more expensive to buy British cheeses and charcuteries than it is from Italy or from Spain because they are producing so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here it's still, kind of artisan producers, smaller. But you can like if that's something that's really important to you, you can certainly find it. So there's like Cannon and Cannon, there's Neal's Yard Dairy, Paxton and Whitfield. There's lots of really great traditional British cheesemongers, and I've gotten some cheeses from them for this platter today. In my platters for clients, there's definitely that option, but it is, of course, more expensive. I do try and kind of have a balance between the two. And you kind of have to offset like your single uses. So, like, are you going to use, single use bowls for things like dips? I mean, if you're running it down the table, like it's definitely better to use like ceramics, or I use coconuts, which do come from far away. And it's something that I think about a lot, but then I think people can eat the coconut. So it's not a single use plastic, it's not going in the bin. So I think that's kind of where you have to do the trade off. And you have to think about exactly how sustainable you want to be, like to be as sustainable as possible. It's something that definitely occupies a lot of my thought. I try not to use avocados anywhere, but at the same time, I do use coconuts and other things that come from afar because it's just not available here because it's not exactly a tropical climate.
I think it's all a bit of a trade-off, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
if you're desperate to have avocados in the platter, then maybe there's something that you can swap out somewhere else to mean that that's kind of offset and find out what's really important to you and what your priorities are. Because for some people,
Exactly.
they'll have a really sustainable wedding breakfast, but they might be desperate for a brand new dress. So just trying to find those kind of balances
Exactly.
is really important, and knowing that they don't have to suddenly make everything sustainable, but little bits go a long way.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. If you're mindful about it, then that's where it kind of what it comes down to. Because as long as you're thinking about it, you're already going to make better choices than if you're not thinking about it at all.
And somebody's asked on the chat about vegetarian and vegan options, and I wonder if that's a good time for you to show us the one that you made earlier, which I know that you've got an example of in front of us.
So I've gone vegetarian today, and that is because it is ultimately more sustainable. But of course, I do cheese and charcuterie, but also my husband doesn't eat pork, and this is going to be our lunch later. So that's the other reason that we've done this today. And vegan, there's so many great options out there as well. There's some really incredible, like gourmet faux margerie, like there's the fromagerie, and I am not okay. Do incredible vegan cheeses. They're so good, and you don't miss out on anything. But again, like it comes down to cost. Like they are more expensive because they are a really incredible artisan product, and that's kind of where you have to make your decisions because something like a big producer of vegan cheese like VO Life is not going to have the flavor, the texture, the quality, or the
Mhm.
sustainability element that you are ultimately looking for. So this is the platter I'm working on today. So I have laid out the big bits. So that's the
It's
important thing.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's just so eye-catching. It's such a nice way of eating. So we've gone vegetarian today. So we've got Bath Blue, Wife of Bath, the Mary Wife of Bath, which is a wash rind cheese, and Somerset cheddar. And I am really looking forward to having this for my lunch. And then also the crackers are from Peter's Yard, so that's a British company, and they're charcoal. So it's all about kind of color, picking. Don't put two colors together, picking like uh, British produce where possible. So I always try and use the British crackers definitely, but I do tend to use a mix of European and British cheeses.
And this is something that you'll do for people on the day. So you'll come and kind of set up this
Yes,
platter so that you're thinking about colours and thinking about where things sit and how it
yeah,
looks.
yeah. But it's certainly something that people will think like they'd like to do it themselves. And I think you just need to be mindful of your timings because it does take quite a long time, particularly the first time that you do something like this. So maybe if you practice runs with friends or get some friends involved to help. But yeah, it's about blocking out your big colors. Put your big stuff down first and then put the small stuff to complement it around and kind of just make everything pop.
And when we're talking about, I know someone asked about vegetarian and vegan, but I imagine what a lot of people are thinking about at their weddings. So, we've got somebody coming with this dietary requirement, or we have
Yes.
somebody who needs halal, or, there might be lots of different, people that we're trying to cater for. So how do you, on that big scale, kind of accommodate all of those different things?
So actually, it's not that hard at all. So basically, if someone tells me that there is a halal element, which I've done plenty of times, but there is people that eat pork and they still want to have that as part of it, you can easily separate them out and still make it really beautiful. So cheese on one side, and then usually like a fruit kind of barrier in between, and then the charcuterie laid out separately, and then like if they have sweets, then another kind of barrier so that it's really clear where people can eat and what they can have. But
So
it's also easier now to find halal charcuterie that's slowly becoming better quality products and more widely available.
but this is just a conversation that people will have to you kind of in that initial planning phase when you're trying to work out exactly who you're catering for and how many people that you need
Yeah,
to supply for.
yes, definitely.
And I wonder if you can tell us some stories. I know you mentioned the Midsummer Night's Dream wedding, which sounds
Yeah.
great. But if you have any other examples of, weddings that you've been to where people have used this in kind of other ways they might have brought sustainability into their wedding.
So I did my brother's wedding back in Australia, and basically their idea was they didn't want to have a cake. They're not really cake people. They thought, a lot of their friends, like it was a really kind of young crowd. They thought they didn't want to do that. So what we did is a cheese wheel cake. So instead of having it all laid out, we had like really big like cheeses stacked on top of each other,
Amazing.
and then all like grapes hanging down and figs, and it looked like a cake. And everyone was like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing! Put all the fruit on that cake." And they're like, "Is that a cake?" I'm like, "Oh, it's cheese." And then they went off and had their pictures done, and then the venue broke it down into like a graze, and that was what everybody had while they were waiting for the bride and groom to come back. And yeah, that was a really nice kind of afternoon, and it was just really lovely. Instead of kind of having something big in the afternoon waiting for them to come back, and then they had no dessert in the evening either. They just had kind of like a meal, and it was on New Year's Eve. It was a very party vibe, and it was beautiful, and everyone was so impressed.
I love it. A cheesecake sounds like my absolute dream. I think I might be in
Me
heaven.
too.
That sounds absolutely perfect for me. So I guess what you're trying to do is allow everyone to have the kind of wedding they want rather than the kind of wedding that they expect that they should be putting on for people.
Exactly, exactly. And there's so many ways of making everybody happy. Maybe not everybody, but you can absolutely kind of make it about you and make it kind of like, this kind of catering makes it a really dynamic, like interactive wedding, and it's fun. And I think a lot of people now want to have fun weddings, and I think especially now they're going to want to like interact with their guests instead of kind of that traditional sitting at the table away from everybody else. And I want to get involved and have a bit of a party, because why wouldn't we?
Exactly. I think more and more people are going to want to start to do that kind of informal, bringing everyone together kind of setup. And I'm interested, you mentioned earlier that you've been working in hospitality for a really long time, and I wonder what got you interested in sustainability in the first place and how you ended up here.
So there is a lot of food waste in hospitality, and it is something that continues to be attempted to tackle in some areas, and I guess not in others. And I think it's just like moving from working from big corporate hospitality companies to working for smaller independents that put sustainability at the forefront of
Mm-hmm.
everything that they did in terms of sourcing. Like one of the places that I ran was a cafe deli event space, and sourcing everything from the deli was the first kind of time that the consultant and I really were able to look at those things. So, like not putting Coca Cola in the fridges, because Coca Cola, A, doesn't need our help, but also isn't a sustainable company, and choosing things like Karma Cola instead, who do so many great things for, the cola farmers, cola nut farmers. And it's just like starting looking at it that way, but also, so I am front of house and I am a sommelier. And I think also, like, from a wine point of view, I actually work with Emma, who was on
Ah, amazing.
yesterday. Yeah, with Unwind. And I think particularly working with Unwind and working for Unwind is just, they're amazing. And they think about everything, like from business cards to where their wines are coming from to how they package everything when it goes out in their boxes. And I think the more you work with people like that, the more you start thinking about it and go, okay, there's a better way to do this.
Those people who are real experts and really curious about the kind of decisions that they're making. And the
And
wines that
just
I tried
care.
yesterday, if anyone wants to go and catch up on that, I spoke to Emma from Unwind yesterday afternoon and we tried some of their wines. But we tried three and they were all so different and so interesting. And I think the thing that I really took away from it is that they all had a story behind them, and she knew the names of
Yes.
the producers and she knew where they were
Yes.
grown, and why that particular batch was so special and all those kinds of things, which you don't get if you go to a wholesaler and buy something that you recognize the name of, which is probably what I would do in normal circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. And, they're just really big supporters of other, people in the community trying to do the same thing. So we have just this week put some menus together so that when we reopen, we're going to do Saturday hire out. So it'll be Forage and Feast catering if that's what you choose, or there's more traditional ones as well, and the wines. So, that's one way of doing it. And, small weddings as well can be very sustainable and still really enjoyable.
We were talking yesterday about this kind of food and wine pairing thing, which I think a lot of people, maybe don't know that much about, and it's difficult to know where to start when you're looking at it. So I wonder what kind of advice that you give people about, how do you choose wines that's going to match with your food, but that everyone's going to enjoy, and kind of make sure that it's a nice process.
I think personally, when I got married, um, we I thought about kind of the wines that I enjoy drinking, that I know that are good, that are crowd pleasers. And I think like the mistake sometimes that we make when we're doing these things is we go for New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Mm-hmm.
But it is, like, as much as people love it, it is still quite a divisive wine. And I think it's like knowing what you love. And I think it's really important, like when it's your wedding and it's your story, to choose things that kind of represent you if you guys have a favorite wine. I think that's really important too. But then in terms of pairing, when it comes to weddings, this kind of catering, bubbles goes with everything. So I think like that's always a safe choice, like a really nice, sustainable pet nat. And there's plenty that are like, it's important not to go too funky, but there's some really great ones out there that are still really elegant, delicious wines, and people that are usually prosecco or champagne drinkers won't turn their noses up at because they're too natural. And then I think, like nice, clean white that's really enjoyable, and medium bodied red, because it's, you don't want to go too heavy either. And you can always have a few bottles on the side for those that are like, I really just want a heavy red. And I think it's easy. I think it's easily navigated if you know your audience.
So I think that's your top tip for this whole thing. You mentioned that when you're planning your own wedding, and I wonder, congratulations, by the way, for whenever that was.
Oh, a while ago, 8 years.
But I wonder, from your experience of planning that, do you have any kind of learnings from when you're planning a wedding on how to make it more sustainable, or things that people might not have thought of if they've never planned a wedding before?
So we were pretty young and we just moved to London and we didn't have a lot of money when we got married. And so I did everything myself. And I think that was very stressful. And I think, I don't know if I necessarily do anything different because our wedding was beautiful and I loved it, but it was quite stressful. I did my hair myself, my bridesmaids' hair myself, did the flowers on the morning they arrived dead. It was a whole thing. I think like good planning and good friends is the most important thing if you want to do everything yourself, which I certainly had. And but if you can budget it in, maybe don't do everything yourself.
This is where you call on the experts to bring in a little
Yes,
bit of extra
yes,
help.
yes. And we didn't do our own we didn't do our own catering. That was well before like grazing was a thing. And my husband's Moroccan, and we actually went to a Moroccan restaurant, and then I selected all the wine. So we had Moroccan food and Australian wine, and it was perfect.
A
That
blend.
being said, yeah. But that being said, there was too much food, and I think like knowing what I know now, I would ask questions. Like we had to tell them to stop bringing food, and like it was just because they wanted it to be so special for us.
Mm.
And my dad still talks about it, how it was like the best meal he ever had. And I'm like, all right, Dad.
They just kept bringing the food out for you.
So I think like if you're doing something like that, just have a conversation about how much food is needed and how much is coming. And I think I just didn't think about that because I left that part entirely up to them. And they spoiled us and it was really sweet, but ultimately like that would be the one big thing that I would have a firm conversation with any other large events that I did going forward. Like we don't need that much food.
See how much we actually need before they keep bringing more stuff out. This kind of idea, though, of the I guess people sitting down, the traditional hot wedding meal where you get lots and lots of food. I wonder, from the weddings that you've been to, are there people who miss that, or does everyone kind of jump straight in on the grazing bandwagon and they don't notice it?
Um, so I think like a few years ago, people were still having mixed elements of both because they weren't really sure if they could get people on board with the grazing. But ultimately, I think once drinks start flowing, promise I haven't had it. Drinks start flowing. Um, People like cheese. They like charcuterie. Like if you're worried about your dad, your uncle, your grandpa not like getting involved, there is elements that you can add in. Like I make empanadas and pastries like that that make it kind of like more of a meal. Or
Mm-hmm.
like I also make really beautiful gourmet quiches. And that's kind of like has that element of traditional, is still beautiful, fits in with the grazing, and kind of like ticks that box for kind of people that are a bit more traditional that think that's not a substantial meal. It has that then those substantial elements. So there's certainly ways around that and ways to kind of make everybody feel included. But like I said, like can't really go wrong with cheese and charcuterie. Maybe there is going to be people at the wedding that just take all the chorizo because they're like, well, this is me, but they'll still be happy.
They'll be happy just stealing all the chorizo in the corner. That will be
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely
Someone
fine.
else will be like, "Do you want to leave some for someone else?" But they won't care. That's how it goes.
And I guess you were talking about packing things up and using it later, and that's something that you might not be able to do if you've given everyone their own individual meal and they haven't eaten it. That
Yeah,
just will go straight
definitely.
in the bin and never be kind of
Exactly.
yeah. So do you find a lot of people will box it all up and then take it home and have it in the morning?
Yeah, so like so not so much. I've only done a few big weddings because it was a pretty new company going into 2020. But people at home were definitely like, "Oh my gosh, like we had a bit left and we ate it for like the next day." Or if people order like a few people have wanted to have special days in the past year and they've ordered like a really big platter for two and they're like, "Oh my God, we just grazed on it for 2 days." And I'm like, "That's awesome." Like that's in my family, that's definitely what we do. When I was starting out, I had to practice. So we would have some really nice events, and then box it all up and then bust it out the next morning with coffee for breakfast and just be like, this is
I think I'm
so
going to
good.
order myself a tasting platter. I just want to, I want to experience it. And I know also, so we're running a competition as part of this
Yeah.
virtual wedding fair. And the North London Waste Authority have put in a competition, and you can win one of these tasting platters or kind of a little taster box. You have to go onto their website to enter, and you have to do it by the 28th of March at midnight.
Okay.
So run to your laptops immediately and enter so that you can win one of these. And can you give us a little kind of overview of what people could win?
Yeah, so it's our decadent grazing platter actually. So it's always available. So even if you miss out, you can certainly still book it and I'll deliver it to you. And it's suitable for 4 to 6, which is perfect in time for tomorrow when we can have 6 people together outdoors. And it has cheese, charcuterie, of course, if you win it and you wanted it to be vegetarian or vegan, that's something that it will be. And it has all of the cheese, charcuterie, the brownies, and basically everything delicious. Chocolate dipped pretzels, dips, falafel. It's got everything really. A fresh honeycomb, all the
I'll be
things.
ordering a box straight after this, I think. I'm going to get my unwind box and yours at the same time. It will be delightful.
Yes.
And if people like me are going to go and order one immediately, where can they find out a little bit more about you?
So on Instagram at Forage and Feast UK or online. So it's www.forageandfeastuk.com. And you just have to hit that order now button. We've got some
Amazing.
really great boxes available for Easter. And but we deliver 7 days a week, so you never have to be without a grace.
So if you have any more questions for Jacinta about your own wedding or about sustainable eating, head over to her website and ask her, or you can comment on these Instagram and Facebook videos. They're going to be going up after this, so you can watch them again and again and again. And I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you so much for coming to join us. And to everyone else watching, I'm going to be back here at 2 p.m. So come back for our next session of the Something Green Virtual Wedding Fair. I'll see you then.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.